Good evening, everyone. My name is Ukechukwu Francis. We've been having our biology classes, and today we'll just be continuing from where we stopped. The last classes we handled cells, organizational structures, and different forms of cells in living organisms. So today we'll be taking it further to discuss about the structures of these cells, but we'll not be talking about the cells of the five kingdom classifications. We'll just be limiting it to the cells of the plant and animal kingdoms, right? So I'll be sharing my slide so that the class will begin in earnest. All right. So can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So let's begin. So today we'll be looking at the cells and its structure. So by the end of this class, we will be able to learn what plant cells are, their structures, what makes up plant cells, and the animal cells also, what makes up the animal cells. And then we'll look at the similarities and then some of the differences of plant and animal cells. All right. So let's continue. Now, plant cells. Let's look at plant cells. I believe strongly that by now we know that cells are the basic unit of life, right? We have established it over and over again that cells are the basic unit of life. You know? Every form of life starts from the cell. You know? Every form of life starts from the cell. Even in human organisms, as a human, before you are created, or let me say, there's what we call embryogenesis. The Hello, Joshua, can you move? Can you move? Where is this noise coming from? All right. Can you mute your? Okay, so cells are the basic.
Just please, Mr. Francis, just go ahead and mute him. Mute him by yourself. You can, since you are the host.
I've found that. I don't know why. Okay. So let's. All right. So cells are the basic units of life, and for the plant cells, they are the basic units of the kingdom Plantae. Now we talked about the five kingdom classifications, which include the kingdom Moneras, the Protistas, the fungi, the Plantae, and the Animalia. So right now, what we want to focus our attention on is the plant and animal kingdom, because every form of life, they are the major players in this kingdom classification. So that's why we'll be measuring our attention to these individuals, right? So plant cells, they are also eukaryotic. You know, my previous class, when we talked about the kingdom classifications, I talked about what a prokaryotic cell means and what a eukaryotic cell means. So the difference between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell is just the presence of membranes. You know, any cell that has no membrane is regarded as prokaryotic. We will get to this. That's why we are studying the cells now, we'll be looking at the structures so that you properly understand what differentiates a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell. So a eukaryotic cell has membranes. It has membrane structures. That's what makes it a eukaryotic cell. So let's look at a typical example of what a plant cell looks like. Right now, this is what a typical example of a plant cell looks like. Now, this angle here, so can you see the point I am using now?
Yes, sir.
Good. So this outer structure is what we regard as the cell wall. This outer structure is what we regard as the cell wall. All right, that's what we regard as the cell wall. Then in between the cytoplasm and the cell wall is what we call the cell membrane. Right, in between the cytoplasm, all these, where you see all these structures, all these organelles, they are called organelles. These places, all these internal spaces are called the cytoplasm. It is made up of, it's an aqueous solution. It is a water-based solution. So that's why the percentage of the cell is made up of water, and that is on which the organelles are found. So whatever structure of the cell you are looking at, whether it's the nucleus, whether it's the endoplasmic reticulum, whether it's the microtubules, whether it's the Golgi apparatus, whether it's the mitochondria, whichever one you are looking at, all right, is found in the cytoplasm. So what separates the cytoplasm, which is the internal structure of the cell, and the external structures is the cell membrane. So this inner lining is what we call the cell membrane. This inner lining right here is what we regard as the cell membrane. I hope we are following. Whereas this thick covering is regarded as the cell wall. Now, a major difference between animal cells and plant cells is that animal cells don't have a cell wall. There's a presence of cell membrane, but they don't have a cell wall. That's the major difference between an animal cell and a plant cell. So let's continue. We can see here different organelles found in the cells. We can see from here. There are major things you just need to note, all right? That, for instance, if in your external examinations, in your WASSCE or your NECO or your JAM, there are major important things they look out for in cells, right? That once you have those structures in your diagram, you are almost have drawn a complete cell. The first is the cytoplasm, all right? Once you're able to draw the cell wall, then you indicate the cell membrane, right? The next one will be the cytoplasm, which is the aqueous solution, a water-based solution that houses the organelles, right? The other organelles are found in it. Now, after that, you draw your nucleus. You draw your nucleus, all right? The nucleus is where the DNA is found. Where the DNA is found. The DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. That's the full meaning, right? We'll get to that. That's where the DNA is found. You know, every individual, every cell is made up of a DNA. DNA is what controls, is where the genetic material is found, right? The characteristics or the what we call physiology. There is what we regard as the genotypes and the physiology. What you see as the external characteristics of every living thing, especially in the plant and animal kingdom, are being determined by the genetic coding that occurs in the nucleus. So the nucleus is where the imprint is being coded. All right. If a plant is going to be short, tall, resistant to diseases, and all of that, it is done in the nucleus. So what scientists have done now these days is to study these DNAs. They study DNA and they dig deep into the genes. For instance now, if you want to produce a plant that is resistant to diseases, all you just need to do is to dig deep into the DNA and see what part of the DNA or what can you attach or what can be added to make this plant resistant to diseases. So how these things are being done is they look for a plant that is already resistant to such diseases and study the DNA to find out what in that cell makes it resistant to disease. So when they found that particular gene responsible for making the plant resistant to diseases, they can now clone it. The process is called gene cloning. They will now clone the gene and replicate it. It's called gene replication. They will now replicate it in the DNA or in the nucleus of another cell. All right. Okay, so let's continue. So inside the nucleus is what we call the nucleus. This small structure here is called the nucleus. All right. Now we have the endoplasmic reticulum, we have the ribosomes, we have the Golgi apparatus, we have the rhizosome, we have mitochondria, we have microtubules, granules, we have the vacuole, we have the peroxisomes, we have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, we have the chloroplast. All right. So now let's proceed. Okay, the structures now, the structures proper. Let's continue. Okay, sorry. The cell wall, like I said, just like I pointed out, the cell wall is the rigid outer layer of a plant cell. It is the rigid outer layer. It is rigid. It is not flexible. The opposite of something being rigid is flexible. So the cell wall is not flexible. So what is the function? What does it function in the cell? It provides support and structure to the cell. It provides support and structure to the cell. Let's take note of that. It provides support and structure to the cell. All right, let's move on. So, like I said, this is the cell wall. This is the cell wall. So the function of this cell wall is to provide support and structure. So the structure the cell takes is determined by the cell wall. All right, let's continue. The cell membrane found just after the cell wall. So the cell membrane functions to protect the internal environment from the external environment. All right, it protects the internal environment from the external environment. What I mean as the internal environment is all these things found inside the cytoplasm. That's what we regard as the internal environment. All of these things that you can find inside the cytoplasm is the cell's internal environment. And whatsoever that is happening outside the cell membrane is regarded as the cell's external environment. So the function of this cell membrane right now is to protect these internal structures from the external environment, right? Because if that is not done, being that the internal environment is an aqueous solution, you can easily get things flow into it. So, but the cell membrane ensures that things that are not supposed to be found in the cell don't get into the cell. Are we following? Okay. So the chloroplast, this is the site where what we know as chlorophyll is produced. Chlorophyll is responsible for the greenish color we found in plants. All right. So when you see a plant and the plant is greenish in color, what is responsible for that is the chlorophyll found inside the chloroplast. I hope I am not confusing somebody. All right. So the chlorophyll is found inside the chloroplast. Okay. So the chloroplasts are disc shaped and they are responsible for photosynthesis. They are responsible for photosynthesis. We all know what photosynthesis is all about. We know. So the plant traps in sunlight and uses it to produce its own food. Right. So as a result, the structure responsible for that action is the chloroplast. That's the structure responsible for that. Okay, so we talk about the nucleus. The nucleus is the control center. You know, in WAEC or all of these exams, they might ask you which of these structures is the they might ask you which of these structures is the control center of the cell. It is the nucleus. And like I explained, the reason why it is called the control center is because that is where the genetic processes in the cell occurs. You cannot separate a cell from its genetic processes. Are you getting it now? The genes are what is responsible for the characteristics of the organism. Genes are responsible for the characteristics of the organism. So you see a plant very tall, what is responsible for that is the gene. You see a plant that is dwarf, has stunted growth and all of that, what is responsible also is the gene. You see a plant, instead of growing normally, it is growing abnormally. What is responsible is the gene. The same is applicable to human beings. The same is applicable to humans. All right, that's the same thing applicable to human. Okay. For instance, to tell you how important genes are, we'll take an example of sickle cell anemia so that you understand how important genes are. So now, for instance, in sickle cell anemia, when you see people suffering from sickle cell, which we know that happens when a parent with that has AS marry someone with AS, or someone with AS marry someone with SS. All right, the offspring or the result of that union is a sickle cell child. So what happens? Why did A result to sickle cell? Why did sickle cell occur instead of a normal functional human being? It is simple. It is because in the DNA, where the amino acid gluten is supposed to be, another amino acid replaced it. The amino acid called valine went and took the position where the amino acid gluten is supposed to be, and that results to what we know as sickle cell. That's to tell you how important DNA is. So now, inside the DNA, all right, you'll find genes. Inside the genes, you'll find amino acids. And amino acids are forms of proteins. They are proteins. Are you with me? All right. So what separates the nucleus from the cytoplasm is what we know as the nuclear membrane. Let's go back. Now, you see this thing that looks like dotted structure, this dot, this thing that looks like dots, that's the nuclear membrane. That's what we regard as the nuclear membrane, right? This thing here is what we regard as the nuclear membrane, right? So it protects the nucleus from the cytoplasm. So by mere looking at the cells, you can be able to predict what the functions are. By mere looking at them, you can be able to predict what the functions are. All right. So the nucleus is protected by the nuclear membrane from the cytoplasm. All right. So now the cytoplasm right now. So let's look at the cytoplasm. So it is an aqueous solution, a water-based solution in which all cell organelles are found. Every cell organelles are found in the cytoplasm. This is it. This is the cytoplasm. So when I mean it is an aqueous solution, it is a combination of salt and kind of water and a mixture of salt to some extent. Water and salt. Now, the reason why it is called a solution, okay, that's chemistry. I believe for those of us taking chemistry, you must have been taught about this. Okay, let me just write. The reason why it is called a solution is because solution is equals to what we know as solvent plus solute. Solvent plus solute. Sorry. Solvent plus solute. So in this case, the solute is the salt, while the solvent is the water. Did you understand? The solute is the salt, while the solvent is the water. That's why it is called a solution. This chemistry, this elementary chemistry, I am trying to break down so that we understand better. Okay, so the mitochondria is often regarded as the powerhouse of the cell. Let's let's take note of these things. Let's just take note of these things. The nucleus is called what? The control center. The nucleus is called the control center. The cytoplasm is where all other organelles are found. The mitochondria is regarded as the powerhouse. The powerhouse. Why is it regarded as the powerhouse? Because that is the place where respiration occurs. It is the point of respiration in the cells. What does it do? It converts stored energy in food to glucose, right? What the body functions with is glucose. Okay, it's glucose. That's why hemoglobin in the blood passes sugar. Right? It passes sugar from one point to the other. All right, let's continue. So what the mitochondria does is to convert the energies in food, which is fat and sugar, to glucose that the cell can use. Sorry, I use body here, but the whole idea is that the cell can use it. Okay, that's the function of the mitochondria. So let's quickly go back to, all right, so this is the mitochondria. These structures, these things you see here, all of these things, this and this are the mitochondria. So they are the points of respirations, the point where respiration occurs in the cells. They are the points where respiration occurs in the cells. So let's continue. All right. So the Golgi apparatus or Golgi bodies, Golgi complex, different textbook, different people, they call it different names. It can be called Golgi bodies, it can be called Golgi apparatuses, it can be called Golgi complex. All right. They are membrane covered sacs that prepares protein for exports. Okay. All right. So now, proteins are synthesized in the ribosomes. Ribosomes, what we call the ribosomes, are responsible for protein synthesis in the cell. So after these proteins have been synthesized, the Golgi apparatus or the Golgi body, prepares these proteins for export. Are you following? After the proteins have been synthesized by the ribosomes, the Golgi apparatus or the Golgi body prepares these proteins for export, all right, to where they are needed. We know the functions of proteins. We know what proteins functions for, all right? Apart from the human body, we know what proteins do, right? Now, Golgi apparatus prepares the protein for export. So let's go back and see what Golgi apparatus looks like. All right. This is it. This is the Golgi apparatus. This is, are you seeing it? So this structure here is what prepares the protein for export. It prepares the proteins for export. Follow me closely. It prepares the protein for export. All right. So let's continue. The ribosomes, I've talked about the ribosomes. They comprise of RNA. RNA simply means ribonucleic acid. Let me put it down for somebody that might want to jot it down. RNA means ribonucleic acid. Good. So that's what the RNA means. Now, when you go deeper, we'll still come to this when we'll be talking about enzyme, proteins. By the time we get to proteins, enzymes, and the rest, further in our discussions, that's when you understand the function of these things. All right. So now the RNA functions more like the DNA. Good. Let me just give us a similarity now. The RNA is more like the DNA, but the major difference is that this one is single-stranded. Hello, are you with me? Can you hear me? Can we hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure. So the RNA is single-stranded, while the DNA is double-stranded. Okay. So we have the endoplasmic reticulums. Now, something happens when ribosomes attach themselves to endoplasmic reticulum, something happens. All right. Ribosomes cannot, let me not use cannot. For them to function effectively or properly, they need to attach themselves to the, are you serious? 10 minutes more. They need to attach themselves to the endoplasmic reticulum. So let me be very fast so that this thing doesn't cut me short. All right. So now, this is the endoplasmic reticulum. This is the endoplasmic reticulum. All these tiny stuffs you see are the ribosomes. They are responsible for the protein synthesis. So whenever they are attached to the ribosomes, look at, sorry, the endoplasmic reticulum. Look at the endoplasmic reticulum. You can see that there are tiny things that covers it up. Whenever they are attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, which is short form ER, it is called the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Rough endoplasmic reticulum. When they are not attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, it is called the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So we have the rough endoplasmic reticulum and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So let's continue. Now, in exam, they might ask you there are two forms of endoplasmic reticulums. What are they? They are called the rough endoplasmic reticulum and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So the ER, what does it help to do? It helps in moving protein from one point of the cell to the other. So after the protein have been synthesized, listen, after the protein have been synthesized by the ribosomes, something happens. The endoplasmic reticulum helps to move it from that point of synthesis to the places where they are needed. That's the major function of the endoplasmic reticulum. Why the Golgi apparatus enables proteins for export. All right. Now, endoplasmic reticulum can also export proteins outside the cell. I don't want you to confuse endoplasmic reticulum with Golgi apparatus. The main function of the Golgi apparatus is to prepare the proteins for export. All right. Just let's take, for instance, you want to export something outside Nigeria, right? What do? You package your goods, the goods you want to export. You now take it to the airport or the sea, whichever platform you want to, whichever way you want to export it, either to the airport or to the sea. You want to take it out. Now, what the Golgi apparatus or the Golgi body does is this. That process of you preparing that your product or goods for export outside Nigeria is what the Golgi apparatus does. It prepares it, but it is not the one that will do the function of the export. Are you getting it now? The Golgi apparatus is not responsible for the export. What it does is for the preparing, the packaging. In the same way that you prepare it, but you will not export it yourself. You take it to the people in charge of the export. Those people will now help you to take it outside Nigeria to where your product is needed. That's the function of the endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum now takes the prepared protein ready for export and exports them. Did you get it to this point? To this point now. The next one is the vacuole. Vacuole is this big opening here. It's called the vacuole. Now there's also what we regard as the vacuum membrane. The vacuum membrane. The vacuum membrane. Right? So what's the function of the vacuole? They store food and waste, you know, because the cytoplasm is made up of 90% water. The cell also carries out functions. All right, some of the products, some of the things produced by this cell might be toxic to the cell itself. What the vacuole does is to store those toxic materials. The vacuole stores them, right? This vacuole stores the toxic materials, the toxic waste, so that it won't harm the cell, and then prepares them for export. All right. The next one we'll be looking at is the lysosomes. The lysosomes. These are the lysosomes. That's the point of enzyme synthesis. You know, the digestive enzymes. Now, a quick one. Ribosomes synthesize proteins. Lysosomes synthesizes enzymes. Let's get it. Even if that's the only thing you get from this class, let's get it. Lysosomes, enzymes. Ribosomes, protein. Endoplasmic reticulum exports protein. Golgi apparatus prepares protein. It cannot be more simpler than this. All right. Now, types of cells, types of plant cells, types of plant cells. Now, we have the xylem cells. The xylem. Xylem helps to transport water and mineral from the root. You know, when the root of a plant absorbs water, it traps water and minerals from the ground. All right. Those minerals and water will be needed in different parts of the plant. The cell that transports these minerals and water to where they are needed, especially in the leaves, is the xylem cells. That's why when transpiration occurs, transpiration is the process of the leaves losing water to the environment. All right. The reason why the leaves can lose water is because xylem cells have transported water to the leaves. Did you get it? Xylem cells are the cells responsible for the transport of water and minerals to the leaves. Now, why the phloem cells transport sugar from the leaves to other parts of the plant? What happens? In photosynthesis, you know, I told you that photosynthesis is the opposite of respiration. What happens in respiration is that the cell, all right, uses stored food to produce glucose known as sugar. All right. When these sugars are being produced, that's what the cells or the plant makes use of. Now, from that point of sugar production to its usefulness, the part of the cell that helps to transport that sugar from the leaves to other parts is called the phloem cell. In fact, how many of us know about palm wine? All right. Have you ever wondered why palm wine, for those of us that drinks it, it's palm trees. You go to palm trees, you see them accumulate there. You just see those palm wine accumulate, and then the palm wine tappers will go and tap it and bring for us, we will drink. Do you understand what happens there? What happens there is this: the phloem will carry those sugars from there and go and store them there. It will carry the sugar from the palm tree and go and store them in the form of sack that the palm wine tappers will now go and tap and produce palm wine that we'll now use to enjoy and do some other things we want to do. Did you get it? Yes, fine. So we also have the parenchyma cells. All right. So the parenchyma cell, the reason why it's called the parenchyma is from the word parent. From the word parent, right? It's from the word parent, parenchyma, parent. It is the major cells of the body. It is the major cells of the body. It makes up the plant leaves and are responsible for food production and metabolism. That's the parenchyma cell, responsible for food production and metabolism. While the sclerenchyma cells usually exist in the roots, they are very hard. The sclerenchyma, scleren means hardness. They are very hard. The sclerenchyma cells are hard. Why are they hard? They are hard because they are made up of hardening agents, hardening materials, right? So they are mostly found in the roots of plants, while the collenchyma cell are also hard, but not as hard as the sclerenchyma cell. So